Hi, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log for Wednesday, August 19th, day 3 of the Democratic National Convention. So we're going to talk about day 2. It's DNC for Lefties. I'm here serving as kind of a handrail as you walk up the steps. For my fellow lefties, let's hang on. Let's hang on to reality. I know a lot of you want to vote for this guy, and I understand why. I do. I really do understand why. The harshest criticism in the world, the harshest criticism of the Orange Menace can't be severe enough. The worst criticism is well-deserved. So I understand why you want to vote for Joe. I really do. And I'm not telling you not to. But we got to keep our heads together. We have to point out the insanity of all of this. All right, lots to get to. We're going to review day 2. Today is all about yesterday. It's all about day 2, last night. Well, it's official, of course. They ran the roll call vote, which was very interesting. Got to talk about that. Got to talk about Jill Biden, who closed the show. Some other speakers. Lots to get to here. Let's see what we can handle. Oh, I got to start with this, though. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, my reason for living these days. She's the only hope in that party. I mean, God bless Bernie. He's passed the torch to AOC. Now, let me correct myself right off the bat. Bernie was asked recently about his future, and he said, well, what about it? I'm here. I'm doing my work. I'm doing my job. I'm loving it. I'm loving my job. But that was the general suggestion in the very question was, well, are you passing the torch now to AOC and others, the squad? And he was very kind about that, and he did say that he really, really loves working with younger people and meeting them and seeing how they're advancing the cause. But he's not going anywhere. Hey, man, he's part of the team. So correct me, stop me in my tracks if I ever talk about Bernie Sanders in the past tense. He's absolutely here, and he's with us until he decides not to be. So no talking about Bernie in the past tense. So if you hear me do that, call me out on it. All right, so AOC. Much was made out of the fact that they only gave her 60 seconds. Oh, what a slight. And I added my voice to that chorus. It's like, man, you are giving the progressives nothing. I have to make another little side note here. Labels are so inadequate, and they really muddy the waters. When I use the word progressive, I mean progressives. I mean AOC. I mean Bernie. I mean the actual left. And as I've said many times, but it bears repeating, on an international scale, Bernie and AOC are just left of center. They are basically centrists on any international scale you look at objectively. Now, relative to the United States scale, they're about as far left as you're going to get and still be able to be on national television and make a speech. Anybody to the left of Bernie and AOC just doesn't even get a hearing. And believe me, there are plenty of people. I know them. They're my friends. They're my comrades. They're my social media circle. There are lots of people, believe me, lots and lots of people to the very, very far left of AOC and Bernie. All right. Well, I don't want to get into all of that. Okay. AOC. Last night was the night for, and if you watched conventions over the years, you know this is how they do it. They make nominating speeches for the candidates. Now, there were only 2 candidates last night. Only 2 primary candidates took their delegates to the convention, Joe and Bernie. Now, this happens all the time. This is not at all a rare occurrence. If you're a candidate in the primary, you can drop out, like Pete and Amy and the rest of them did, and just surrender your delegates. Or you can not officially drop out, like Bernie in 2016 and again in 2020. He took his delegates to the convention. Now, he suspended his campaign at a certain point. He acknowledged, I will not be the nominee. Then at a later date, he actually even endorsed Joe Biden. I endorse Joe Biden. He said the words. But he takes his delegates to the convention for a very legitimate reason, to try to have some sway in the platform of the party and in the naming of party leadership and in writing the rules for the convention and setting up rules going forward for future conventions and party business. That's just what you do. It's always gone this way. So as part of this process, then, on the second night of the convention, a few people get up and make some speeches. You make a nominating speech. So in this case, for Joe Biden, someone nominates Joe Biden. They officially put his name into the hopper. They make it official. And there has to be at least one second. You know, like the old Robert's rules, I move such and such. Do we have a second? I have a second. Okay, so we have a nominating speech. We have a second speech, at least one. Sometimes there are more. And there, okay, now you're officially in the book. So they had a nominating speech for Joe Biden and a couple second speeches. And the same thing for Bernie. Bernie had a nominating speech and one second speech, and that second speech was from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a big Bernie supporter. Now, I didn't know before last night that that was going to be the case. I had just heard, like everybody else, oh, they're only giving her 60 seconds. And, oh, everybody was up in arms. Oh, what a slight. No, but you know what? 60 seconds for a seconding speech, and actually it turned out to be about 90 seconds, was fine. It was what everybody was doing. I mean, they only gave Bill Clinton 5 minutes as one of the big speakers of the night. So it was fine. It was fine. And she gave a great 90 seconds. I knew she would. I knew she'd do it. But I got to talk about this. Now, I see this headline that I just had to comment. I don't really comment that often. I don't add my thoughts to the thread, but I just had to. The headline that I see from NBC News, AOC backs Sanders for president, ignores Biden in brief remarks. What? So my comment, as I just said, and this is what I wrote last night. Again, the headline, AOC backs Sanders for president, ignores Biden in brief remarks. My comment, well, of course. She was giving the seconding nomination speech for Sanders. It's part of the official proceedings. They weren't, quote unquote, brief remarks. This headline is insanely stupid. So, now, to the writer's credit, this was part of the live blog. And this entry was written by a guy named Dartunoro Clark. Now, the article itself is fine, the little blog entry. The author makes it clear what's going on. I have no objection to that. But I don't know who's writing the headline that everybody sees because, of course, nobody ever, 99.9% of people do not click onto any articles. They just read headlines and then make their knee-jerk comment. AOC, listen to the difference here. AOC backs Sanders for president, ignores Biden in brief remarks. Totally misleading and divisive and incendiary, and shame on NBC for doing that. All right, so you know what? Let's listen. Let's listen to AOC right now. 90 seconds.
Good evening, bienvenidos. And thank you to everyone here today endeavoring towards a better, more just future for our country and our world. In fidelity and gratitude to a mass people's movement working to establish 21st century social, economic, and human rights, including guaranteed health care, higher education, living wages, and labor rights for all people in the United States. A movement striving to recognize and repair the wounds of racial injustice, colonization, misogyny, and homophobia, and to propose and build reimagined systems of immigration and foreign policy that turn away from the violence and xenophobia of our past. A movement that realizes the unsustainable brutality of an economy that rewards explosive inequalities of wealth for the few at the expense of long-term stability for the many, and who organized a historic grassroots campaign to reclaim our democracy. In a time when millions of people in the United States are looking for deep, systemic solutions to our crises of mass evictions, unemployment, and lack of health care, en el espíritu del pueblo, and out of a love for all people, I hereby second the nomination of Senator Bernard Sanders of Vermont for President of the United States of America.
So there it is. In 90 seconds, AOC said some things that you're not going to hear anywhere else. Talks about a mass people's movement. Anybody else going to use that phrase? Mass people's movement? She actually talked about the 21st century, as everybody else seems to be living in the early 70s in this thing. Guaranteed health care. Yeah, you're going to hear the word guaranteed out of Joe's mouth or anybody's mouth? No. Guaranteed education, guaranteed living wage, guaranteed labor rights. Nobody else is putting it this way. AOC stands alone. She stands alone. You think you're going to hear the word colonization describing U.S. history from anybody else in these 4 days? You're going to hear the words misogyny and homophobia, xenophobia. No, she's telling it real. What other phrase does she toss out? Deep, systemic solutions. Deep, systemic solutions. AOC absolutely stands alone. In those 90 seconds, you heard what you'll hear in no other minute or hour of these 4 nights. So good for AOC. All right, so there's that. Oh, I went to the Council on Environmental and Climate Crisis Caucus meeting yesterday. I keep telling you, go to these meetings. They're fun. They're really interesting. See, this is the thing. I really am loving the actual people, you know, the lower tier folks and the regular folks. I have no issues. And no, none of them, few of them are as far to the left as I am. But this is something that I have to say I am softening a little bit. I'm very, very happy to have, and let's avoid labels because they just get confusing, but if you just picture that spectrum again. On the international scale, those in the center and those even a little bit to the right of center, I'm very happy to have them in the world with me. You know, let's together decide how best to proceed. And then we get into the very traditional, and I can be downright traditional when it comes to bipartisanship, working together through differences and having lots of voices at the table. That's absolutely where I am. But the difference for me, and I think for you, if you're a fan of this show, is that the whole right side of the spectrum needs to just break off and go away. We just need to shoot them into space. They need to just fall off the cliff into the ocean. They need to be gone forever. And what remains then is the Joe Bidens of the world are about as far right as you get to go in the acceptable discourse. And those of us on the far left are finally, once and for all, represented. And we're far from that because AOC, again, on this international scale, is just left of center. And she's barely represented. She's the one making it happen. She and Bernie are making it happen. I think there are plenty, I know for a fact, that there are plenty of folks on the left, on the actual left. But to finish my thought there, I really am happy to share the spectrum with these center and center-right folks. Then we can have this kind of bipartisanship that people always want. But no, I'm not going to have bipartisanship. I'm not going to go across the aisle and work with Nazis and white nationalists, white supremacists. No, I'm not going to do it. That's not anything to be praised and lauded. No. Oh, which brings me, well, okay, let's skip ahead here to the John McCain thing. All right, so there's a video. narrated by Cindy McCain, wife of the late John McCain, Republican Senator, Arizona. And it was all about John and Joe's friendship, this great deep friendship they had. I guess they met very early, before McCain even was elected to the Senate. And they were lifelong friends, close friends. The families got together. They had their little barbecues. And as Cindy tells us, they were just always joking. It was like a comedy show. Now, these guys, can you imagine? Wouldn't you love to be a time-traveling fly on the wall for these family get-togethers? And John and Joe cutting up? Can you imagine the Mad Men kind of humor that was flying around? These guys, you want to love Joe. I know you do. But man, I'm already sick of him. He's from the Mad Men era. He's an old guy. The traditional gender roles among John and Joe and Jill and Cindy, you got to know they were strongly entrenched in those little get-togethers and their barbecues. We know who was grilling the steaks, and we know who was setting the table, and we know who was taking care of the kids, and we know who was drinking, and we know who was making the dirty jokes over on the side, and we know who was slapping the wives on the butts. Can you just imagine that scene? I'm so sick of these guys. I'm so sick of that picture, of that ethos, of that aesthetic. I'm so sick of it. Yeah, okay, you want to vote for Joe because we have an existential threat in the White House. I totally understand that. But painting this picture and just sanctifying Joe, because then, of course, they take it from the personal friendship into this whole, and this a point they're pushing really hard of going across the aisle, everybody's favorite phrase, across the aisle to work with the other side. And as I said, I'm fine with that as long as we're all in the reasonable spectrum of basically decent human beings. So I'm happy to have Joe and even John McCain on the right-hand side. But we live in a different world. We really honestly do have evil lizard people on the other side right now. There's no compromising with Nazis. There's no compromising with fascists. We just have to win. And this fantasy that the DNC is trying to push here with Joe and his bipartisanship, we are getting the hard sell. And then Jill comes on with her video, the big moment of the night, Dr. Jill Biden. And they go through her bio. They do a little video here before her big address. And it looks like her thing, first ladies. I wish that would just go away, that term. Oh, you have to identify some cause, and for her it's going to be military families. This is such a throwback. This is so traditional. She's a mother, she's a teacher, she's the rock of the family. Now, these are all good things. These are all wonderful things, and she's probably a wonderful person. But it's so traditionally gender specific. It's just it fits so nicely into the old patriarchy, where you heap praise on the woman for holding our family together. Of course it's a good thing. Of course it is. And she's a teacher. Nobody loves teachers more than I do. That's great. But, isn't that convenient? Because that also fits so nicely into the established patriarchy. Oh, teacher, that's a profession we encourage women to have. Now, the convention itself, I spent a lot of yesterday talking about how they pulled it off, and it was brilliant. And there were no changes at all last night, except for the roll call, which we should try to find some time to talk about here today. So I'm not talking about that today. They pretty much stayed with the exact same format. Lots of regular people recording themselves on their phones and sort of Zoom-type get-togethers. So anyway, all pretty much the same. That's why we're not talking about it today. That was really interesting yesterday. Now I'm kind of overwhelmed and getting pretty tired of this coronation and the sanctifying of Joe. I mean, they're painting an absolutely unbelievable picture. It's it's really insulting. We're all just being gaslighted. I mean, nobody is as perfect as this stellar, over-the-top description we're getting of Joe and the whole family, to a point that's become really insulting at this point. Nobody is this great. Nobody is. Okay, so he's nice to the security guard. And you know what? You've convinced me. He's a nice guy. He's nice to the help. You know? You've convinced me. You don't have to convince me anymore. I really do. I buy it. But he's also a human being. We know he has a temper. We've seen it. We've seen his temper out on the campaign trail. He loses it from time to time. And he yells at people, yells at voters, calls them idiots, says they're full of shit. There's no way these people are that perfect. You know they've got issues. They've got family problems. They fight with each other. They fought with their kids. You know this happened. I don't think it serves us at all. In fact, just the opposite. It's a disservice to paint this ridiculous picture and expect us all to buy it. I'd much rather see a little rough around the edges than this maudlin display we're getting. I want to see some honesty. I want to have room for a little irreverence rather than this barrage, this bombardment of sentimentality. We're just steeped in myth, the myth of America, the myth of the presidency. We don't need this anymore. The next generation doesn't need this. Talk about one step forward, two steps back. Yeah, the step forward is getting the Orange Menace out of the White House. But now taking 3 and 4 and 10 and 100 steps back in this ridiculous, centrist, mythical status quo stench that Joe Biden represents. No. I understand why you're voting for him. I absolutely do. But I'm not going to get caught up in this, and I'm going to encourage you to seek the truth in things and to seek legislation, to seek leadership more in the mold of AOC in the coming generation, where you're not afraid to talk about deep systemic problems and deep systemic solutions. And if I'm sounding cynical today, well, I am, but I really do love the people. Lots of regular folks getting their shot. The roll call vote was pretty wonderful, seeing all these different landscapes and landmarks and regular folks. And again, the diversity of America, the diversity of the Democratic Party. There are lots of reasons to be hopeful and optimistic. The leadership, though, and the decisions they're making about how to put this across, yeah, I'm not buying it. And I just find it so unnecessary. You don't have to give people a hard sell on this. We just got to be flat out honest and upfront about the condition of things, which they've been good about. They've been really good on that side of the ledger, making the case against the Orange Menace. Although I will say, one criticism there, they haven't said word one about the Republican Party, about all of the enablers and sycophants. Nobody said anything about that. It's 100% about the Orange Menace. You know what else? Nobody is dumping on the banks. Not word one about the banks. Maybe Elizabeth Warren will do that. I think Warren speaks tonight. Also, surprisingly, almost nothing about international relations, about the rest of the world. There is a whole world out there. It finally came up with John Kerry, and of course that was his role as former Secretary of State. Talked about bringing nations together and American exceptionalism, all very boilerplate, all very old-fashioned, but I was happy at least to see some acknowledgement that there is a world out there. I guess they feel like, they've done the polling on this, so I guess they know that voters don't really care too much about international relations. So almost nothing there, but Kerry checked that little box. along with Colin Powell also helped to fill in that little area. Yeah, okay, so bottom line, you guys, you've got me convinced. He's a nice guy. Generally speaking, he's a nice guy, and he likes people, and he's good to the help. And his wife is a good person, and she was a teacher. But come on. You're laying it on pretty heavy. I don't know if I speak for anyone else, but I just need to see some badass honesty. There's only so much inspiration you can heap on us. Mix it up a little bit. I want to see some rawness, some raw emotion, not manipulated emotion, some irreverence, some humor, some rough edges, honesty. This is all getting really tired, and it's only night 2. This tired boomer story you're telling does not relate at all to the youth and the vibrancy and the diversity and the grit and the creativity of this burgeoning, really interesting, colorful America, the one we're seeing in these nice little videos you're making, the one we saw in the roll call. But then, okay, let's go back to the old white guy with his old white stories and paint him in this light that is just completely artificial. Nobody's this perfect. Yeah, as great as the production is, and I really am impressed with the production of the convention itself, you're really pulling it off very nicely. But Democrats, you got to get some youth into leadership roles and into creative roles. You got to give more than lip service to the progressives, the real lefties, the future. Right now, it mostly just looks like a monumental snow job. You're trying to gaslight us. You're trying to hypnotize us. You're trying to create some sort of mass delusion here. And we're going to sanctify this great leader. Oh man, I'm so sick of it. Especially when we have such a beautiful, vibrant generation coming up. And you really are snubbing them at this point. You're tossing them a bone here and there, but really giving them nothing. And if and when Joe loses to the Orange Menace, as he very well may do, then you're going to turn around and blame the very people that you're ignoring. You're going to blame millennials. You're going to blame the youth vote. You're going to blame Bernie supporters. You guys are running on an agenda of magic 8 balls and mood rings and platform shoes and bell bottoms. And this sickening over-sentimentality just oozing constantly. You have some great, great people in your party. There are great, great people in this country. And what you're offering is just played. It is old. It is tired. Good luck. Good luck. All right, there you go. I love you. I really do. The country's filled with great people. The Democratic Party is filled with great people. Not at all happy. Not at all happy with the leadership and the presentation they're giving us. Nope. All right, that was our little recap of day 2. Day 3 tonight, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. I'm Charles Purcell. Love you. See ya.